4:24.
All right.
You'll have to
Okay, yeah,
excuse me if I disappear for a minute just to attend to my sinuses.
yeah,
But
yeah. And since
y-
since you don't feel so well today, what we can do is if there's not a whole lot of comments, we can just go to the next verse, just we'll take it easy
okay.
today. Don't worry,
All right.
don't worry.
I think we're live streaming now, so we can
All
begin.
right.
Haribol.
All right, I'll go ahead and chant Mangacharanam and before we start. Oh my goodness, turn to Shagina Shalakaya. Chakshurumilitamina Tasma Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Mano Vishtam Stapitamina Bhutale Swayam Rupa Karamayam Didati Swaparantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Parakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Shah Shri Rupam Sagarchitam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savaditam Vrajina Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vidamsha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagapate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radhikanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanis today Devi Pranamami Hari Priya Panchakalpa Trudesha Kripa Sindhu Vevicha Patitinam Bhavnevyo Vaishnavevyo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So today we are reading from Canto 2, Chapter 4, Text 24. Chapter is the process of creation. And I think we're getting towards the end of the chapter, so we might finish it today. So let me pull up the Sanskrit here. Namastasme Namastasme Bhagavate Vasudevaya Vedasi Papurgyanam Ayam Somya Yanmukam Buruhashavam. I offer my respectful obeisances unto Srila Vyasadeva, the incarnation of Vasudeva, who compiled the Vedic scriptures. The pure devotees drink up the nectarian transcendental knowledge dropping from the lotus-like mouth of the Lord. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. In pursuance of this specific utterance, Vedasi, or the compiler of the system of transcendental knowledge, Srila Sridhar Swami has commented that the respectful obeisances are offered to Srila Vyasadeva, who is the incarnation of Vasudeva. Srila Jiva Goswami has agreed to this, but Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has made a further advance, namely that the nectar from the mouth of Lord Krishna is transferred to his different consorts, and thus they learn the finer arts of music, dance, dressing, decorations, and all such things when they are relished by the Lord. Such music, dance, and decorations enjoyed by the Lord are certainly not anything mundane, because the Lord is addressed in the very beginning as para, or transcendental. This transcendental knowledge is unknown to the forgotten conditioned souls. Srila Vyasadeva, who is the incarnation of the Lord, thus compiled the Vedic literatures to revive the lost memory of the conditioned souls about their eternal relation with the Lord. One should therefore try to understand the Vedic scriptures, our nectar, transferred by the Lord to his consorts in the conjugal humor, from the lotus-like mouth of Vyasadeva or Shukadeva. By a gradual development of transcendental knowledge, one can rise to the stage of the transcendental arts of music and dance displayed by the Lord in his Rasa Leela. But without having Vedic knowledge, one can hardly understand the transcendental nature of the Lord's rasa dance and music. The pure devotees of the Lord, however, can equally relish the nectar in the form of the profound philosophical discourses, in the form of kissing by the Lord, and the rasa dance, as there is no mundane distinction between the two. And I'll go ahead and read the translation again. I offer my respectful obeisances unto Srila Vyasadeva, the incarnation of Vasudeva, who compiled the Vedic scriptures. The pure devotees drink up the nectarian transcendental knowledge dropping from the lotus-like mouth of the Lord. So, when I was giving a class on Wednesday, a person raised their hand and they asked me to talk about Srila Vyasadeva, because they didn't understand his position. And so I began on explaining that Vyasadeva is a literary incarnation of Krishna. He's a Shaktivesh avatar. But this verse goes into a little bit more detail. And Prabhupada says he's an incarnation of Vasudeva. So there's the Chaturvyuha, Vasudeva, Aniruddha, and the other two I can't remember off the top of my head at the moment. But so to be more specific, these are incarnations of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and Srila Vyasadeva comes from there. But he's also his job, more specifically, is to write the Vedic literatures. And so Prabhupada explains here. He says something really nice in this purport. This transcendental knowledge is unknown to the forgotten conditioned souls. Srila Vyasadeva, who is the incarnation of the Lord, thus compiled the Vedic literatures to revive the lost memory of the conditioned souls about their eternal relationship with the Lord. So the knowledge that we have in Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita and all the books of Srila Prabhupada, their source is not an ordinary source. And what's very sweet about this is that ultimately it's coming directly from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It's not that we have to guess who wrote this or who did this and try to figure it out. But Krishna, like he says in Bhagavad Gita, he is the compiler of the Vedas. And so when we're in this material world and we're trying to enjoy, or we're trying to figure out, why we're here, Krishna comes and he gives a manual in the form of the Vedas to help us, remember who we are and remember our eternal relationship with him. And so I think, just one of the things I appreciate about the Vedas, and I was having a conversation with my son about this, is that whatever or wherever you're at, let's put it like this, one can take to following the Vedas. It's not that you have to mold yourself necessarily, like everybody has to be on the same level to take up spiritual life. That was one of the questions my son had. He's 17 now, so he's starting to question the world. And he's starting to question, just he's very intelligent. So he's looking for his own truth. And he told me, he said, I've been looking at these different religions. And for a long time, he didn't have much interest in Krishna consciousness. He was vegetarian, but he was more into Christianity. So, I let him, you know, uh, go down that path because all my family, they're very Christian. And then this past weekend, we were having this conversation where he was saying, one thing I don't understand is, not everybody is able to be exactly the same, or is able to necessarily live uh, a life that's described in the Bible or in the Quran, or they're not all able to, they're not ready to, obtain like these states of purity that's described. And so that's why I was explaining to him that the Vedas are actually very nice because according to how one is conditioned, one can take to practicing. It's not an all or nothing thing. So if one is on the level where they have something that they like and they just want to do that thing for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, okay, you can do that. If one just wants material enjoyment, okay, there's a process for that. But also, if one really wants to know, one really wants to get to the bottom of things and know actually who God is and what he does and what his activities are, you can also find this out. You know, there's everything, all the way up to the most intimate knowledge. And so, also, what is stated here is that by gradual development of transcendental knowledge, one can rise to the stage of the transcendental arts of music and dance displayed by the Lord in his Rasa Leela. So, but without having the Vedic knowledge, one can hardly understand the transcendental nature of the Lord's Rasa dance and music. So, this also brings to another point is that one here we can understand by studying these Vedic scriptures is that God has activity. He has things that he likes to do, and he's not idle. And so all this can be understood by studying the Vedas, but also just by taking up the process, no matter where one is at, because eventually that will lead one to the highest level. One gradually gets purified through this process. So, with that said, I'll open it up. Do you have any comments you would like to add to this?
Hare Krishna. I think you've covered it pretty thoroughly. I don't know what I could possibly add to that. Um, I don't know if you want to, if we could just go on, or if you want
Yeah, we can go on
the
then.
next.
For sure. Um, yeah. So and then also, yeah, one last thing I can add about this is that we
Okay.
can see from this verse that Krishna is the source of everything. You know, thus they learn finer arts of music, dance, dress, decorations. All these things are like very beautiful and are things that people value in human society. Like you go to these big cities, like I've been to like Washington D.C. and New York, and they have like art museums. People can go and they can see. I went to a symphony in San Francisco. Uh, all of these things that people value really, or that people like to enjoy in society. Um, According to like different modes of nature, of course, Krishna is the source of all of them. So yeah. All right. We can go to 25 then. And if you're not feeling like you can read I can just read this one as well.
Maybe you can, because I'm having some problems,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
sinuses.
No, no, it's all good. I can, yeah.
All right.
Etare ma burajan nardaya viprachetate veda garbo vyadya shakshan yaraha hariratmanaha. My dear king, Brahma, the firstborn, on being questioned by Narda, exactly. Sorry, hold on one second. Sorry, technical difficulty. Okay, let me start over. My dear king, Brahma, the firstborn, on being questioned by Narada, exactly appraised him on the subject as if it had been directly spoken by the Lord to his own son, who was impregnated with Vedic knowledge from his very birth. Report. As soon as Brahma was born, one of the abdominal lotus petals of Vishnu. As soon as Brahma was born of the abdominal lotus petals of Vishnu, he was impregnated with Vedic knowledge, and therefore he is known as Vedagarbha, or a Vedantist from the embryo. Without Vedic knowledge, our perfect infallible knowledge, one cannot create anything. All scientific knowledge and perfect knowledge are Vedic. One can get all types of information from the Vedas, and as such, Brahma was impregnated with all perfect knowledge, so it was possible for him to create. Thus, Brahma knew the perfect description of creation as it was exactly appraised by him to him by the Supreme Lord Hari. Brahma, on being questioned by Narada, told Narada exactly what he had heard directly from the Lord. Narada again told exactly the same thing to Vyas, and Vyas also told Shukadeva exactly what he heard from Narada. And Shukadeva was going to repeat the same statements he had heard as he had heard them from Vyas. That is the way of Vedic understanding. The knowledge of the Vedas can be revealed only by the above mentioned disciplic succession and not otherwise. There is no use in theories. Knowledge must be factual. There are many things that are complicated, and one cannot understand them unless they are explained by one who knows. The Vedic knowledge is also very difficult to know and must be learned by the above mentioned system. Otherwise, it is not at all understood. Shukadeva Goswami, therefore, prayed for the mercy of the Lord, so he might be able to repeat the very same message that was spoken directly by the Lord to Brahma, or what was directly spoken by Brahma to Narada. Therefore, statements of creation explained by Shukadeva Goswami are not at all, as the mundaners suggest, theoretical, but are perfectly correct. One who hears these messages and tries to assimilate them gets perfect information of the material creation. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purports of the second canto, fourth chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled The Process of Creation. So I'll read the verse again. My dear king, Brahma, the firstborn, on being questioned by Narada, exactly appraised him on this subject, as it had been directly spoken by the Lord to his own son, who was impregnated with Vedic knowledge from his very birth. So there's different types of knowledge that's mentioned in the introduction of Sri Upanishad. And one type of knowledge is where one basically tries to guess what the truth is by their own reasoning. Can't be this, can't be that. Okay, well this is like this, and therefore that must be like that. And that's one type of knowledge. And then the other type of knowledge is where you gather knowledge from a descending process, as described here, uh, coming down from various teachers. And the reason why this type of knowledge is described as the most perfect is because when one is trying to figure out things through their own senses, then according to how one is conditioned, that's what they're gonna feel that this is true or this is not true. Or they're gonna manipulate things according to how they personally desire. So a good example of this is like you see in Protestantism, Christianity, you have so many different denominations. And this is because various people, um, they heard something and are like, okay, this doesn't sound right to me, or I don't agree with this, or I don't agree with that. So therefore, I'm going to go off and start my own church. And so as growing up, I remember on my street corner, we had the Baptist, the Methodist, the Presbyterian, the Episcopal, the Catholics, so this, so that. And, they all had some like nice things to them. I can appreciate that. But they all had their differences too. And so when I would go there, the different ones, they would say, "Oh, we accept this, but we don't accept that." And so this was basically on because their own interpretation of scripture. And I asked one of them one time, I said, "Well, how do we know when we're reading something if like that's the way it should be interpreted or that's what actually God meant? Like where's the commentary on these verses?" And they told me, "Well, you come up with your own interpretation. It doesn't really matter." So the problem with that though is you can have people that don't have such good intentions, and they come up with really far out there interpretations and can really mislead people. um I remember this one place that my mom was going to uh at one time. The I don't want to say the name, but anyway, the people were really into God spoke to me directly, God told me this, God laid this on my heart, and kind of making a philosophy about that. But what we can really appreciate about the Vedas here, what I personally really appreciate about the Vedas, is that it's a scientific process that's being passed down in a line, and people are giving it exactly how it is received. Now, according to time and place, one might explain something in different ways or use modern examples to try to make a point. Like for example, now we have this AI technology, you know, and so one might necessarily use an example from that to explain the philosophy of Krishna consciousness because that's what people can understand. Or or and so forth, which that didn't exist before. However, the actual essence of the philosophy is still the same. And that's what we're not changing. Prabhupada gave an example once that when we're presenting Krishna consciousness, you give old old wine in new bottles. So you're giving the essence of the philosophy, but according to the time, the situation that you might find yourself in, your presentation might be different than, let's say, okay, Vyasadeva to Shukadeva Goswami. But the thing is that when one actually takes to it and practices it, the result should be the same as anybody else previously. So that's really what's beautiful about this whole thing is that you have this knowledge that's coming down in a line. And then Krishna also in Bhagavad Gita, he explains what happens if it gets broken. Then he comes personally and reestablishes it, or he sends one of his followers to reestablish it. And so Therefore, therefore nothing is ever really permanently lost. And during our own parampara, we can see that when Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared, he gave the chanting of the holy name because in Kali Yuga, we're not able to do so many austerities. And then after he gave the chanting of the holy name and after he disappeared, over time, his teachings started to disappear a little bit or they became corrupted. And by the time Bhaktivinoda Thakur appeared, um, people didn't really take Gaudiya Vaishnavas seriously. They thought they were a bunch of like sahajiyas that take everything very cheaply. And so a lot of the original philosophy had been um, was not really being followed. And so therefore Bhaktivinoda Thakur, what he did was he reestablished uh, the teachings of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and that was one of his major contributions is that he could see that people weren't following exactly, and so he reestablished the original teachings, and it actually took him. I'm trying to because I read this biography of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, so I'm wanting to get all the details right. It actually took him, I believe, quite a while to find the Chaitanya Charitamrita because because it just wasn't widely available. And finally, he found a copy of it, and he read it, and then he started to, like reestablish a philosophy based on that. And so it's just an example that we have in our own line of how, Krishna ultimately takes care of everything. Things can be corrupt. Things can become degraded as they do in this material world. But this knowledge, as it is, can never be permanently lost. And so, one of the Srila Prabhupada's great contributions is that he actually took this knowledge and he translated it in English and he gave it to us because this knowledge was completely lost to people in the Western world for so many hundreds of years. And Prabhupada, he often explained, and as I've said, that previously the whole world, they had some idea of this Vedic knowledge. But over time, things became degraded, things became lost. So there was a need to reestablish that. So what I'm trying to get at here is that Krishna ultimately, he takes care of everyone. He will make sure that this knowledge gets reestablished, that the Vedic knowledge is there, that is never permanently lost, that it never goes away. Everything Krishna, everything that directly comes from Krishna, it can never be permanently taken away. Even the Varnashram system that was also established by Krishna, even though it's not uh, it's not functioning in the same way that it did back many, many years ago. But even that system is somewhat still around because we still have people that are inclined to be more Brahmana-like, inclined to be more Kshatriya-like, inclined to be more Sudra-like. So even though we're not training people necessarily in this way, that's still. And so yeah, I think the point of this purport that Prabhupada is getting at is how this knowledge is actually given and how it's passed down, how it's coming directly from Krishna, going to Brahma, then going to Vyas, and then Vyas is giving it to Narada. And then therefore for ourselves, we see how we should present the knowledge and how we should receive the knowledge. And also another thing that's not really mentioned here, but you can kind of imply, is that Krishna gave Brahma the knowledge, and then with that knowledge, came how Brahma understood how he should serve. If we remember his whole entire story, after he got the knowledge, then he was able to engineer the universe with uh with Vyas, Vyas Vyas was also given the knowledge, and then we understood that he was able to write the Vedas, um, and so forth and so forth. So also with this knowledge that we get, we can understand also to how we should serve. Some services given from that. It's not just that we're giving knowledge and giving nothing to do with it. So I'll uh I'll uh I'll stop talking here and see if you have anything you want to add to this, human. I'm talking more because I know you don't feel well.
Well, it's true, and I appreciate that very much because I really don't have too much to add. And mostly what I would like to comment on is my admiration for you, for your ability to hold such a lecture on this material. And after you've said what you needed to say, I can't really think what else there is to add, you know. Just that it's been an incredible chapter, I guess. The process of creation. I don't know how much of the process of creation was talked about because it seemed mostly giving respectful obeisances to everybody and telling it's like the who's who and what's what and tell
Yeah.
everybody, get everybody who is everybody in order and thank you very much and thank you very much and how great it is to be here and the actual process of creation, well, I think maybe back at the beginning of the chapter we had a few comments on that, but uh moving on from here at the end of the chapter, it's say the cause of all causes is coming up, chapter 5, and which should also prove to be fascinating, because who doesn't want to know what the cause of all causes is,
Right.
Right. And even critics of religion will say, well, but then what caused the cause of the cause of the cause? So, it's I'm sure it's going to be a very exciting chapter to read.
Yeah, I mean that's also another thing with the Bhagavatam is that the chapter titles sometimes it takes a while to actually get into that subject matter. Um, just like Mukunda and I were talking one time, and he was saying that English is a very direct language. Like you guys are to the point about about stuff, and and it is true. Like if we're gonna have a conversation about something, we're gonna start like talking about like that thing. But you see with the Bhagavatam, you know, it takes a bit to get around to that topic because there's obeisances, there's glorifications, and this is all part of like understanding the proper culture. But in the same way, it's like you see this in like the village life or like where life is much slower, and people like say they go to somebody's house, and it's very common for them to just like sit and talk, and then after 10 or 15 minutes be like, okay, so like why why did you come, what was the purpose of your visit? Like I went to also another thing I was speaking to McQuinda about is the difference between like doctors here and doctors in the US, because I went to a doctor and she's like, "Oh, so how is your son? Like, what is he studying?" Like she's like, as we're like having this conversation, and then we finally like get around to like, okay, why am I there? Treatment, da, 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 da. And it's totally different from like if you go, unless you go see a naturopath, which like I did have a naturopath doctor, so we would be more informal with each other. But if you go like in the U.S., you go see a doctor, they sit down and they're just like, okay, what do you have? What are your symptoms? Okay, here's the medicine, and then go. Like it's very direct like that. So, yeah, in societies where things are just more slow, it takes a bit to get around to the actual subject matter. but you get there.
Absolutely.
But it's all kind of sweet, it's all kind of
Yeah.
sweet because even though we've had a lot of like obeisances and glorifications, I feel like I've learned a lot about, I don't know, just like the proper attitude and like, details about the greatness of Krishna and the greatness of his devotees, which is really what's needed to understand like the higher topics in 10th canto. So it's all setting the foundation.
Yes.
And the purports have been very sweet. I mean, we've had long purports, but like sweet purports as well.
Mm.
So, so okay. So should we start? Should we start chapter 5?
Well, I think we can leave that for next time. We can make this a short class.
Shorter class. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's not too much in the way of announcements, although I guess the primary announcement is that the books of Manonatha Maharaj are no longer available on Amazon for
Right.
whatever reasons. When you go to the link to Kadacha Bookstore, it will take you now to another company for buying books called Lulu. And it's the same process. They print the book and they send it to you. Maybe it could be that the postage might be a little bit more than it was when under Amazon, but it's still basically the same process. And of course, the PDFs are available directly there at Kadasha Editions without having to buy the book on Lulu. But you'll see the links are there if when you follow the articles and are interested in the books, the links of how to get them are now functioning and so please move ahead and check it out.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there is a whole group of people now that are boycotting Amazon, so this might work out.
Yeah, right. I'm thinking, well, if they took my Guru Dev's books down, then maybe I should stop my membership too, But because that's why I joined after all. But yes. So that's
Right.
what's going on there. And in the meantime, all else remains the same. We have the chats in English and Spanish, and we have the Facebook page, Archive, where articles in English and Spanish and Italian, and as well as some of the YouTube videos will appear on a daily basis. So please check that out. And if you would like to go directly to YouTube, remember that we are right here at what is the name of the YouTube channel now? Oh, geez.
Es Kishorito.
Yes, Kishori Kunda. And there you'll find also videos not only of the classes, but you'll find videos of individual lectures and videos of the pasatiempos of Guru Dev in Vrindavan, where he's walking around or driving around and speaking at some of the historic sites. So please continue to follow. And that's all I have to add for now.
All right, all right, all right. Well, Yamuna, I hope you feel better
Okay.
soon.
And
And
we'll beginning chapter 5 next week. Yeah.
yeah, we'll begin chapter 5 next week. Govinda, if you're watching, I hope you feel better soon as well. And I'll see you both next week. And yeah, Hare Krishna.
Haribol.
Hare Krishna.